Well, this ASQ webcast presentation titled, We Move Our Own Cheese, Channing Change. I'm Pablo Baez with ASQ, and today we have with us presenting on this topic Dr. Victor Sower and Dr. Frank Fair. A little bit about Victor and Frank before we get started. Victor is a distinguished professor emeritus of operations management at Sam Houston State University, where he teaches courses in operations management, quality management, technology innovation, small business, and supply chain management, and where he established the Sower Business Technology Laboratory. He's earned numerous awards, including the University-wide Excellence in Teaching Award, the Excellence in Research Award, and the Excellence in Service Award. He's an author of 8 books and numerous articles and presentations, and he's currently the quality management consultant for and the co-founder of Sower & Associates, LLC. Frank Fair is a professor of philosophy at Sam Houston State University, where he's also won numerous awards, including the University-wide Excellence in Teaching Award, the Excellence in Service Award, and he was also named the Piper Professor in 2011 by the Minnie Stevens Piper Foundation of Texas. He also teaches and speaks on various topics, including critical thinking, philosophy of science, and decision-making skills. And both of these distinguished gentlemen have come together to author the recently published ASQ book and title of this presentation, We Move Our Own Cheese. Vic, Frank, thank you so much for offering to share this presentation with our quality community. Let me pass the presentation over to you to get things started.
Thank you, Pablo. As is pretty obvious, the inspiration for our fable, of course, Spencer Johnson's Who Moved My Cheese. And there's similarities between our fable and his, but there's also some important differences, one of which is pretty straightforward. Instead of 4 characters kind of going off in their own directions, we have a team that ventures into the maze. Vic, what another difference that you think is important?
Well, another primary difference is that in our fable, the participants in the book are part of an organization that exists within the maze. So that organization represents their internal environment, actually ignorant of their external environment, which is the maze. I never successfully left the community, gone into the maze, and come back alive. So in essence, our fable is about how a team can come together to explore the maze to find a cheese. A cheese is the same metaphor in our book as it is in Spencer Johnson's book. What we already have and we want more of, or we want what is new to us.
Some takeaways we'd hope people would gather from our presentation and the book if they happen to read it. A couple are pretty straightforward. Why change in the organization is necessary, why some organizations resist change, the limitations of a team. But Vic, there's one that I think you're particularly important.
Yeah, some people here say, if I were only CEO of this organization, things would be different. Well, we wait for that, and we can't wait for the CEO to act. No matter who we are in the organization, we have to take some responsibility for change. And in our book, we show how individuals further down the organization chart can actually be change champions. And we're able to point out that there are risks associated with being a change champion, and we'll talk about those at the end.
Now, it's no secret that innovative change is important. You see, for instance, the IBM survey.
IBM surveyed top management throughout the United States, and they found that a vast majority said that innovation was more important than reducing costs. Our own organization, ASQ, taking the position that innovation is increasingly important to organizations.
I have a couple of slides here that I thought were interesting. They're pretty basic, but it's important to have a kind of perspective on things. Would you go ahead and tell us what you have in mind here?
I recognize this as the technology life cycle, but we represent it as the technology or paradigm upon which the organization is built. Action will be built around a technology, and they'll have an introduction phase, a growth, and a maturity phase. So the technology upon which the organization is founded is unlikely to remain stagnant throughout the life of the organization. And of course, the rate of change in the life cycle varies from industry to industry and organization to organization. The more high-tech the organization these days, the faster the organization will go through the life cycle. the more tech the organization is, the longer the time it will take to go through the entire life cycle.
This slide, I think, is especially interesting. To me, it represents what we've come to call an insightful organization that's capable of serial innovation, not just time innovation.
Yes. So what do you do when your particular technology, the one upon which your business is based, begins to reach the maturity phase? In some cases, such as with Blockbuster, they introduced the new paradigm that put mom and pop bookstores out of business and introduced the big box bookstore. They reached the maturity phase, they had nothing left to do. So Blockbuster no longer exists. Insightful organizations will always be looking for what is the next technology they need to adopt in order to keep the organization running. We'll offer some examples later on of organizations that do a particularly good job of this.
Using things about the pace of change.
Yeah, pace of change is very rapid, and we all recognize that. And Thomas Friedman in 2011 wrote that these terms were very common in 2011 would have quite a different meaning in 2004. Type was a typo, 4G was a parking place. You get the idea. Had you been using these terms in 2004 and communicating with individuals, the message would have been perceived quite differently.
Then update Friedman's list. BuzzFeed was a beekeeper's supply.
Sure.
And,
in 2011, talk about Sling TV, and it's a way to wall mount a flat screen, perhaps. So technology is moving very rapidly. The secular of the technologies reflects that, and so we have to be more in tune to the need for change, the need for innovation.
And this leads to a business from, I know one of your heroes, W. Deming.
Sure. As he said, change isn't mandatory, but neither is survival. And we need to take that to heart. Boris no longer is with us because they weren't able to change. Blockbuster changed the paradigm of how we watch movies and how we obtain video games. They failed to see the changing paradigms of Netflix and Amazon.com, and they're no longer in business. Ampex in the 1970s, and at that time, Ampex had been the inventor of videotape technology. Every program that you saw on broadcast TV was recording using Ampex technology. Invented the instant replay application for sports. Failed to recognize the importance of digital photography and digital taping technologies, and they're a mere shadow of their former selves. They're still in existence, but they're just a small niche player in the market. Kodak, for over 100 years, dominated the market in terms of emulsion photography. When shifted from emulsion photography to digital photography, they were slow to make that change, slow to recognize the market's desire for digital technology over the analog, and they all have gone through bankruptcy and have reinvented themselves. So actually, of this group of four, the success story here is they suffered from failing to adopt new technology, but to recover and reinvent themselves.
Well, let's say I'm convinced that the change is important, but how about models of the change process to understand it, to get a handle on it? What do you suggest?
Fortunately, we do have some models to look at. Kurt Lewin proposed the three-phase change model, and this is deceptively simple in appearance. It's to create change, one must simply unfreeze the organization from its present state, then the desired change, and freeze the organization in its new desired state. We know that this is much more difficult to achieve than it is to show in a model. It's very difficult to unfreeze an organization from its present state in many cases, and we wonder why is it so difficult?
Well, I like the image that's coming next because for any of us, that's what it feels like. You've got this huge lumbering beast that you're trying to redirect, and my organizational inertia is a factor you have to deal with.
So what do we mean by this term inertia, Frank? I know that comes from physics.
Yeah, so That's the physics term. So it is a metaphor when applied to an organization, but we think that there's a couple of factors that are involved in creating organizational resistance to change. Which, first of all, size. It's just more difficult often to change a very large-scale organization. The more important, culture is really the key, and that's one of the things we're going to focus on today.
And I think we have an example of a large organization such as 3M has a culture that's designed for innovation and designed for change. So it is possible to have a large organization that has small inertia because of the culture, and vice versa.
Yeah, really important. I know, as if not discouraged too quickly, just because you are.
Well, so and we're trying to move the elephant. How do we do that?
Well, we've got to think in terms of another model from Kurt Lewin, and you notice it's pretty basic again. You've got forces for change, but also forces of resistance.
Yeah.
So obviously, there's a couple of things you can try to do.
Sure, absolutely. In the current state, the organization, if it's frozen in its current state, the forces for change are balanced by the forces that resist change. And as that state exists, no change will occur. In order to create change, we have to unfreeze the organization either by increasing the forces for change or decreasing the forces resisting change. Ideally, we do both. Thus, then, to create the change and to recreate a stable state with balance of forces at a higher level of performance in order to make sure that we don't backslide to our former state. We want to stay in the improved state. Think about this in the same way we think about the PDCA cycle, that it is a cycle. We don't just go through this one time, but once we've achieved the level of performance of P2, we can go through this identification of meaningful change that needs to occur, unfreeze the organization, initiate that change, and refreeze at a new level of P3.
So you're going to be a change champion. Easier, depending on where you are, or harder.
Yeah.
So obviously, if you're the CEO, sometimes that gives you greater positional power, a greater authority to initiate change. But that's not where we are.
In most cases, we're further down the organization. And this indeed, while we did write the book for CEOs as well, in terms of how they can change their organizations and make them more receptive to change, it's really written for the me down in the organization here. And how do you feel then if you're down in an organization like this, you're going to move an elephant, just how does that feel?
Or the little ant sweating bullets, as I imagine, trying to move and not having a great deal of success. So one response to not having success is?
Let's form a team. Let's add more ants to our team. And certainly it's going to help. But if you look at that, how much additional force can we apply to the elephant? We've tripled the force, but it's still significant to the mass of the elephant. So we're not going to get it to move. So we might think, let's create a more diverse team, get more perspectives and more ideas about how to move the elephant. So with additional team members, still, a group of ants moving an elephant. And unfortunately, the elephant may not even be aware that we're there trying to move it.
Well, at this point, it occurs to me that what we need is leverage.
Oh, leverage.
And the question then is, where does this leverage come from?
Frank, that's what our story is all about. Our story is about how we can increase individual and organizational insightfulness, and our story is set in a community within a maze.
So the listeners, a bit of a clarification of what we mean by insightfulness. So we define insight as the ability to see reality clearly enough to come up with new ideas that are worth testing. And I think that last part maybe deserves emphasis. It's not the case that every new idea you come up with is going to success. But you can come up with ideas routinely that are worth trying out, that are worth creating demonstration models, that are worth exploring. You're on the track for being a serial innovator.
So, Frank, how do we become more insightful individuals?
Well, we've, of course, done some study about this, and we've identified 6 activities that help in this regard. One of the primary things is associating with leaders in the field of interest. it turns out when you do genealogies of scientific success, the strongest predictor of whether someone, for instance, will win a Nobel Prize often is a Nobel Prize-winning scientist as a mentor in the background. Similarly, you can develop genealogies of successful artists. So the idea is you associate with leaders, get where the action is, and this will help you become more insightful. Institute for expertise. You're not going to have insight that are worth it testing in a vacuum. Of course, acquiring necessary expertise can take a investment. Standard issue estimate is something on the order of 10,000 hours. And I think that's important. You had a story about Steph Curry in that regard. I don't know if you'll share it at this point. But.
Well, Steph Curry, in an interview that I saw last week, was talking about how he got to the level of professionalism that he's at now. You know, he's famous for, as soon as he crosses the half-court line in basketball, he's likely to put up a three-point shot. And 9 out of 10, that shot's going in. He said that didn't come as from his genes. That came from hours and hours and days of practice. And also from his father, who before him was also an NBA basketball player. In his youth, Seth Curry used to shoot his jump shot starting at the belt and then throwing it up. And that because he lacked the strength at that age to be able to make the shot. At a point in his development, his dad cautioned him that he would always get his shot blocked if he continued to shoot it in that way. So whenever they played one-on-one basketball, he had made a point of blocking every attempt that Seth made to shoot a shot from the belt. He then taught him how to make that shot in an additional way that cannot be blocked as easily. And Curry was very, very distraught because for 2 months, he couldn't hit a shot from anywhere on the court. It disrupted his entire game. To reestablish his game, acquire new expertise in order to fit the next level of performance that was required in order to achieve his goals on the basketball court.
Well, I like that story just because it shows two of the heuristics and the third one. I mean, you don't go ahead and do all of that unless you're deeply, passionately motivated. And if you don't really care, if you're not really engaged with the subject matter, then it's likely that you're going to acquire the expertise. It's unlikely that you're going to be an insightful individual in that particular area. There's a couple more instances.
Yeah, another point, and that is seeking out diverse experiences. And our collaboration is an iteration of this. I was working on a project trying more deeply into the quality discipline. I was trying to establish the genealogy of quality, the historical perspectives on quality, going back as far as I could. And I looked in the library by Plato, and I didn't quite understand everything that I was reading. In fact, I understood very little about what I was reading in the book. And Frank, while serving on a committee here at the university, and we'd become friends, so I come and invited him for a cup of coffee so he could explain to me what I was reading in this book about Plato. I was able to do that, but then in the course of multiple cups of coffee over weeks and months, I decided that the project I was working on isn't the project I really wanted to do. Frank and I have collaborated for more than 10 years now, looking at the concept of insightfulness and how that applies to quality and how that can help us to create higher and higher levels of quality in everything that we do. Aspect of the interview with Seth Curry that struck me. The interviewer asked him, if you're shooting three-pointers from well back beyond the three-point line, they go in. How do you feel when you shoot a shot and it doesn't go in? And Curry says, when I shoot the shot, I believe everyone is going in. When one doesn't, it's an anomaly. I don't let it bother me. I just move on, get back in the game, and I take the next shot without even thinking about the last one that failed. Game, I might go back and review tapes to see what I might have done incorrectly on the shots that missed. But I'm willing to let those fail. I'm not going to stop trying to shoot a three-pointer because of fear of failure. And we have to adopt that attitude as insightful individuals. We have to be unafraid of making genuine failures. I'd like to differentiate that from careless failures. We're not making an excuse for making careless errors, but if you make errors that are based on your attempt to stretch yourself into unknown territory, you have to be able to allow some of those to fail without daunting you.
It's sometimes hard to do, nonetheless necessary. One other factor that I think is actually important in helping develop insight is you have, in a sense, not try to be in too much of a rush or press too hard sometimes for a solution. You can think and worry and problem, and then sometimes you need to relax, self-diverted to somebody else. The literature and creativity in areas like mathematics and our literature is filled with examples of people who are trying to solve a difficult problem, set it aside, and then maybe a day or a month later, as they're stepping onto a bus, the solution suddenly comes to them. So I think that that's an important thing to think psychologically, that it's not to, press and press and press sometimes. It's not just to relax. And it's not like you're letting it go exactly, but you're letting your subconscious mind do the work. We name a number of innovative individuals that we can go with people like in history, Leonardo da Vinci or Marie Curie. We can bring the story up to date and
do you have any live?
Well, I love Clark. She's a choreographer who has had an incredible number of successful presentations in all sorts of different realms. It's on Broadway. No longer with us, sadly, Steve Jobs seems plainly to merit the idea of a serial innovator. And you found an example very recently.
Yeah, just a couple of weeks ago, I found an article about John Goodenough, who's a serial innovator. He's a professor at the University of Texas, Austin. And in the 50s, he was responsible for developing the technology leading to random access memory. Was the inventor of the lithium-ion battery, and then he's co-inventor of a new glass electrolyte battery that promises to put previous innovation out of business. It's going to develop a new paradigm to reach the lithium-ion battery.
But it's not so much a matter for our listeners, I think, of being able to sort through these publicly well-known people. You might ask yourself, with the organization, who do you know that seems to be the person whom you can rely on to think things through and to come up with ideas, again, that are worth testing?
That'd be good people to associate with.
Amen.
I can remember one of the most creative environments that I can recall was a room in one of the academic buildings here on campus. And while College of Business, it attracted people from physics, from music, from philosophy, from all over campus. Just show up without appointments or any pre-arrangements, just whoever happened to be in there. And the range of discussions that went on there, there's no telling how many grants, how many papers, how many books, how many research initiatives, how many discoveries resulted from conversations that took place in that coffee room.
Yeah, I love that story because it's not about planning to discover. It's being open to discover through your interaction with ladies. We focused on the individual, but we also think it's not a question simply of the individual, that the culture and organization can encourage insightfulness. We have a number of characteristics that you've identified in research, and would you talk about a few of them especially that are important?
Sure. We've done considerable research over 15 or more years with organizations that we consider insightful. And looking at all those organizations that we've worked with, the literature that exists out there with other organizations, we've compiled this list. Just to give examples of these. One hospital we worked with, which is Bronson Methodist Hospital, we were privileged to be able to visit their campus for a couple of days and talk with their leadership. They had been recognized as an excellent regional hospital. The CEO and one of their vice presidents came up with the thought that they were actually like to be recognized as a world-class organization, a world-class healthcare organization. And I decided to use the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award criteria as the means to achieve that vision. Well, you can imagine that it takes to announce publicly that you intend to take an organization from regional prominence to best in class. What if you succeed? You know, egg on your face, perhaps the board of directors decides that you're not the right person to be the CEO. So courage is one of the characteristics. You have to be insightful, but then you have to have the courage in order to pursue that insight. And vision is another one. And this has to be vision that you want to achieve has to be shared throughout the organization. The extent to which Bronson was able to do this came home to me when I was riding an elevator during my visit with one of the custodians. And of the vision, and very succinctly summarized for me the vision that I had just heard from the CEO a few minutes earlier. And one element of that was clinical excellence. I asked the custodian, I said, how do you contribute to the hospital's excellence in terms of the clinical excellence outcomes? And he said, I'll tell you, no one will ever acquire an infection from a room cleaned. So he understood the vision, he shared the vision, he knew exactly what he needed to do in order to help the organization achieve that vision. Another key element, and trust going both ways. The upper echelons need to trust everyone within the organization, and within the organization need to trust the upper echelon.
When we're talking about this, it's important also is it's not just vertical. So outside horizontal with your peers, perhaps in other departments and so on in the organization, and that has that trust much more likely to be in ways that are fruitful than an organization that doesn't.
Exactly. And while good ideas can come from within the organization, some transformational ideas can come from outside. So insightful organizations don't have the not invented here syndrome. An example of that is another hospital that we worked with in England. It's the Great Ormond Street Hospital for Children. They used the Ferrari racing team pit crew as the benchmark for the transition of patients from the operating room to the ICU. Now imagine the surgeons who came up with this insight about the relevance of what the Ferrari pit crew did to their operation received from the management of the hospital. The hospital thought they were nuts. And quite a while for them to convince them that they had a good idea. And eventually they were able to benchmark and greatly improve their process of transitioning patients from ER to ICU.
Particular example, because it's I would have thought that racing team pit crew and hospital handoff would be simple enough. We can learn about how to do one thing better by knowing more about the other. Beautiful example.
Okay. So, do you have examples of insightful organizations, perhaps?
Well, I do. And you cited 3M already. Computer certainly is come back. I mean, the list of innovations is powerful innovation, really long.
Our children's hospital recognized that they could benchmark against the aviation industry in order to prevent bilateral surgical errors, and they virtually eliminated the incidence of bilateral surgical errors at their hospital through that benchmark.
Now, I think you got to make clear when you say bilateral surgical errors, that means things like not amputating the wrong leg.
Correct. That's correct.
That's a kind of really, really serious. And so
Absolutely,
eliminating those are very important. MD Anderson, and that's in our neck of the woods. We happen to live near Houston, and for decades, there's in all sorts of ways of understanding cancer and treating it. And the candidate for an organization, Elon Musk, and in particular SpaceX. We say candidate because maybe we still have to see more of the actual results, but certainly in terms of revolutionizing commercial space industry, SpaceX looks like it's doing a fantastic job.
Well, I think I understand the concept of insight now, and I think I understand these examples of insightful organizations. How does it relate to the themes in our story?
Well, we do have two main themes. One regards the organization, and as we've depicted it, is led by a group of individuals whose job it is to basically say, we'll keep on doing what we've been doing because it's worked so well so far. And so they are risk averse, head in the sand, they're reactive. But by the end of the story, thanks to our hero and his team, they've changed to become much more participatory, more to explore the environment, and that means their community is much more likely to thrive and survive. The environment is changing, and to thrive and survive, you need to be changing, and maybe along with it, or maybe even ahead of it. First, the individual. Long about individuals having insights, but then what can you do with that, and how can you make it work? And is that you have to have the idea in the first place. You have to cultivate in yourself the capacity to have the other ideas that are worth testing.
Okay, well, Dan, try a more insightful individual. So let's say I have additional power. I'm insightful, but I work in a less than insightful organization. How do I go about championing change in that situation?
Well, of course, the first thing is you do have to have an idea. And so, all right, I've got an idea. Okay, now what? How do you can't just get them off the shelf, all right?
So it's that easy to come up with
Not that easy.
idea.
But a couple of terms we like to use in this connection. Yeah, serendipity and sagacity. And I think for my money, the serendipity is the interesting concept. Those of you that are familiar with Alexander Fleming's discovery of penicillin, for instance, it's a really great instance of serendipity. He wasn't looking for an antibiotic. He wasn't looking for that, but he happened to notice in the petri dishes a circle where the bacteria was growing in the petri dish were killed because there had been an intrusion of some Penicillium notatum mold. And he didn't, though, just leave it at that and, oh, son of a gun, this petri dish is ruined. He noticed that there was something there that was worth exploring, and the rest is history, as they say, though it took considerable exploring, by the way. So he is summed up, I think, in a phrase from Louis Pasteur. Chance favors the prepared mind. I mean, chance favors the mind has prepared itself to notice things that are out of joint, that require explanation. And then sagacity is, of course, having the wherewithal to do the exploring and do the characterizing of the problem, and do the finding of the possible solution. This then means discovery is not necessarily a light bulb moment. It's not really, wow, I see it all in the flash. It may be a process that takes a while.
Okay. So I'm enough to encounter where I observed something that I didn't anticipate observing, and I worked on becoming more insightful and more sagacious, and I recognized that the problem is opportunity, two sides of the same coin, but it's of my pay grade. So I'll just simply report it through the chain of command and let people in the right pay grade take care of it.
And then follows, all often, one of the most frustrating experiences you can have in this regard, and that is you don't get a firm no. It just vanishes into the black hole of bureaucracy, and it never surfaces again. So it turns out that simply reporting a problem is maybe not very likely to result in action.
Okay, so what I'll do then is I'll form a team and look into it, and we'll champion it together. We have more power as a team than we have as an individual, more insights that we have. That's the way to do it. We'll just champion it that way.
And surely that's a good element of the approach. The more people can get on board in devising a solution and that thing, but idea. Surprised if along the way people sort of jump ship.
So people might be more risk averse than others, and if it looks as if you're posing something that's counter to what's currently being done, they may not be free to join the team.
I think at this point, from my standpoint on things, it's important not to treat that as a personal betrayal. And you put a different perspective on risks. And I think if you remember that difference in work that people are likely to have, you have to like what happened. You have to appreciate the manner in which they jump ship, but things you may want to not do is create a permanent enemy. And if you can appreciate that, then don't be too surprised if some of your colleagues do not back you.
Okay, but the reality is, some will be loyal. Some will have the courage to stand with me, and together we'll make that team, we'll gather facts, we'll propose a plan for dealing with the problem and the opportunity, and that's going to overcome this issue.
Maybe. It may happen that the culture of the organization is, oh yes, we see what you're saying and we're going to respond appropriately. But all often, what is, you get perhaps a pat on the back and thanks for bringing it up, or perhaps a bit ruder rejection. Why are you bothering us with that? So it turns out, if you want to convince people to make changes, the more serious the change, the more the need for the convincing.
Yeah, you definitely want to do that, so what's missing?
So you have to work on what the organizational culture really values, what it really promotes, and especially the culture at the decision makers level. So we've crafted an insightful plan. It's been now it's been a very point.
Yeah, that can be a scary point. Because think outside the box. When you propose new ideas, things that you haven't tested before within your own organization, you'll be off in areas perhaps where what's worked well for so long for the organization no longer works well in the new arena in which you're exploring, and indeed may not work at all in that new arena. So that leads sometimes to the fact that it's not so much the particular risks that we can identify that we find to be fearful. Sometimes it's the unknown.
It's important, in a way, to acknowledge the kind of concern or fear, not to treat it as sort of less than with a team member and so forth. Because if you acknowledge fears, bravery comes not from being ignorant and not from denying fear, but from being able to manage the fear, being able to control it and use your head when others about you are losing theirs. It is important, I think.
Yeah. So it just stands to reason if you propose and execute projects that involve radical change, fear is part of the equation. We're always concerned with what if.
Yeah.
What if happens? What if that happens? Deal with that.
One way to deal with it is to focus on the potential. It's easy to, in a sense, let the fears grow. A little kid at night who's there's something in the closet or something under the bed, and that you deny that, and you can't just wish it away, but focus on what might be achieved. You can have a benefit that's in the future that outweighs something of the feared harm. I think that's a help to try to at least get you to think through the situation in a way that's likely to be more productive.
Okay, so bravely, we venture into the unknown. Our plan doesn't work.
Wow. So we all scurry back to our our hidey holes. But what we do, then it really has been a failure. And of course, I love this quote you found from Winston Churchill. Without loss of enthusiasm, this is the control thing there, right? Say the failure without loss of enthusiasm. And yes. Next is that what did we learn? What's the after action report? And turns out, of course, that should encourage you next time to plan a little better, maybe think through the situation or whatever the case may be.
Okay. I'm getting to understand a little bit about this change champion thing. It seems to me that one of the things that can occur is that we gain wisdom the more often we go through this process, So they've done this change thing before. We just rely on that shared wisdom, and it's so much easier to do new changes in the future. Whatever worked for us in the past in doing that, that'll take care of us now.
Well, of course, it is really good to think that things are sort of rolling in the right direction. That's reassuring. But of course, it may be too reassuring. We call this the fallacy of appeal to conventional wisdom. Because it's conventional, notice it's wisdom. It is things that really did work, but of course, with that environment out there changing, especially, and we're talking about a competitive environment, there's just any guarantee that what worked really well, and this will continue to work in the future. And that open-mindedness about development and changes, especially in the environment, both external and internal, is something that is really valuable. You can recognize those opportunities a bit more quickly, and of course have a chance to respond, which may mean change.
Okay, that's very helpful. Let's look at another situation. Let's say instead of the plan failing, the plan phenomenal success. And we're very excited about that success as a team. And one of the things we want to do is just collect all the information we have, what we've done, the results we've gotten, and the first time we make this known to everybody, we seek the maximum possible audience and bring that out there and let the champagne corks pop.
Yeah, it's really tempting, I think, when you think you have nailed it. This is the problem. If you're actually asking people to make decisions on the basis of what you've accomplished, then what you're putting them on the spot. The crucial thing is that public surprises. I'm a decision maker. It's one thing if somebody comes to me before a meeting and says, hey, here's what we're going to announce, here's what success we've had, and oh, by the way, here's the change that would fit with that. That at least gives me a chance to think about it, and so forth. I'm just being put on the spot, and people put me on the spot. My reaction is not always positive.
Oh, that actually could create a problem for us.
Mm-hmm.
But the good thing is that I know I can always count on our teammates to stand with us when the going gets tough. If we get the negative reaction to that, my teammates will stand with me, and we'll be able to get through it.
Yeah, after you've been skewered by the CEO, you have a quote from Vince Lombardi that's kind of apposite. I also like just a little riff on, when the going's tough, the tough get going, barely with you. So they may be taking off their jerseys and going a different direction. I think that's entirely possible. And again, it's important, I think, not to take this as a sort of personal betrayal. This is a matter of people estimating what the situation holds by way of opportunities or threats for them. And, it may be disappointing, surely, but it's not, shouldn't be the end of the world.
Okay. Something in an organization, a debacle happens. It could be something that comes from the outside. It could be something that occurs that affects the entire organization. It could be something that affects just our team. But how do you suggest that we react when they occur?
Well, it's a little note on the slide here. It's a lot like, it's a military metaphor, right? With the army has been defeated, and not just defeated, it's been defeated so badly that what was a functioning army is now a bunch of individuals scrambling and running their lives. And it's just something that's hard to imagine how to recover from. In thinking, though, about a debacle, one of the things that happens is forces that oppose change tend to be zeroed out. Because now it's apparent to everybody that things went badly wrong and change is needed. So, of course, the literature about business is filled with examples of heroic leaders. Leah Cook at Chrysler comes to mind, or Lou Gerstner at IBM, who come in when an organization looks like it's on the ropes, and because they have vision and a few of those other things we mentioned earlier, they can turn the organization around. So a debacle, while it's not an experience you'd recommend anybody to live through. On the other hand, it doesn't have to be a cause for just get your cleats and going home.
Okay, see, both the risk of failure could also be an opportunity for handling change to occur more easily.
Yeah.
There's an increasing emphasis within the quality discipline on management of risk. So, what about need to manage risk when we're talking about creating change?
Well, of course, you want to have some awareness of what the risks are, and generally, you want to minimize them. But I think there's a tendency when anybody proposes something new, at the risks of the new, and nearly so much to the risks of the status quo. That kind of bias, I think, means that there's less likelihood of weighing successfully the comparative risk between the innovation and the status quo. So you want to get a handle on dealing with risks, but it I think is very, very easy just to not, if the status quo has been working for you, to assume that that means there's no risk built into continuing the status quo. And that's, of course, false, and everyone knows it's false, but it's really hard sometimes to keep your mind on that.
Okay. We have a success, and we're going to celebrate the successful outcome of our big project. We've learned a lot about our environment. We've explored the environment so much that no longer is it unknown, but it's something that seems very familiar to us. So we believe that happens now. We're in a position to do exactly the right thing, to take advantage of the opportunities that exist there, and to be able to defend against the threats that come from that environment.
And here, I think, is where, among other things, Spencer Johnson's fable really does a significant service. Because, mind you, change happens, and you need to be prepared to deal with it. No, until things have been going well, things have been successful. So when you think you've got things all mapped out, they change. And this is change that's not under control. You don't control the all sorts of factors in the external environment, whether they be new government policies, for instance, or new competition arising in some other country. And so you've got to be prepared and to, in a sense, map you've created of the environment. And I think that's an important lesson to really hold on to, and one that I think Spencer Johnson's fable helps communicate in its own dramatic and inimitable way.
Well, listening to all of this, and I'm convinced that I want to become a change champion, and I understand that I need to become more insightful, and I've seen the list of the 6 activities I need to be engaged in, but time is the big constraint that I have. I don't have enough time to do all that I'm supposed to do, much less do things that are necessary to become more insightful. How do we do that?
Well, I love this cartoon that you found. By the way, this is a neat thing. I recall you telling me that at one point you gave a client a 25-hour clock. Do you want to talk a little bit about creating more time and what that meant for me?
Well, I was working with a client on something that had nothing to do with time management, but said, I like what you're saying, but we don't have time to do it. And I need to create more time. They said, how do we do that? So I gave them a 25-hour clock, which obviously doesn't create more time, but it broke the ice. Mm-hmm. And it come to begin thinking that there were things that could be delegated to others, that could be moved, maybe some things that they were doing that weren't necessary to be done, and they began prioritizing, and they found indeed they could carve out activities that were pivotal to the success of their organization. So one aspect of that was they had some time that was available, and they were able to seek out diverse individuals and situations that they could better prepared them for dealing with the unpredictable challenges that inevitably arise no matter what business you're in.
Well, I think the key word in what you said is prioritizing. And if at all familiar with Taleb's notion of the black swan events, the unpredictable challenges that you can, in some sense, predict will rise, but you don't know when, you don't know from where. And if you want to be able to react to them properly and fruitfully, then you prepare yourself, and that preparation into the diverse experiences and, in a sense, stockpiling of resources, there's no substitute for that, I think. So, yeah, the prioritizing is the crucial thing, I think, and even when, and this is, I think, the hard thing, you can't always say about one of these activities, oh, I see exactly how it's going to impact the bottom line. Yeah, but if you engage in them, then you're just coming up with a solution. You are hit with that unpredictable change or go down.
Okay. Well, at this point, Frank, we need to acknowledge that encouraging people to embark on a risky adventure. We're encouraging people that may not be at the top of the organization chart to engage in activities that many will consider to be quite risky. So we could fail at that.
Yep, and that, no sugarcoating it, that's not going to be pleasant. But what
always need to remember what we need and not be overly concerned about the consequences of failure.
And I think it's success in situations we're describing. A couple of different dimensions to it. One is the reward of a job well done. But also, you've made it clear that organization can thrive and thrive in a changing environment. I think that's important in terms of the long run.
Okay. Well, books on which this presentation was based, the main one is We Move Our Own Cheese, which is available for ASQ Quality Press, and the other is Insightful Quality Beyond Continuous Improvement, which is a secondary source. We would like to thank the American Society for Quality, WebCast, and everyone else associated with enabling us to make this presentation available to you.
Yes.
And Frank, on behalf of ASQ, thank you so much for this great presentation. The ASQ community will definitely appreciate it. And for those of you listening out there, Vic and Frank have also provided an FAQ document list, a couple of checklists, including an insightful organization checklist and an insightful individual checklist, which we'll be sharing where you find these. This presentation itself, you'll have those available as well. For those of you that would like to learn a little bit more about Victor and Frank and what they have to offer, you can email them directly at the emails provided in the next slide. And that's for Victor, it's mgt_VES@shsu.edu. For Frank, it is psy_FKF@shsu.edu. You can also find their book, We Move Our Own Cheese, A Business Fable About Championing Change. That's item 1523, and that's on ASQ's Quality Press bookstore. That's at asq.org/quality-press. And if you'd like to learn more about the tech through ASQ, you can check out ASQ's Resource Center. That's at asq.org/quality-resources for lots more on change management and related topics. For those of you that would like to share a topic of interest like this with our community of hundreds of thousands of quality-minded professionals, or to sponsor an event, you can contact me, Pablo Baez, at pbaez@asq.org. And with that, thanks everyone, and we hope to see you at our next webcast event.